button.
Give it a second.
Hello guys, today we're taking a look at Aaron and his TVR Tuscan? Tucson?
Not Tucson.
Tuscan? Tucson?
Tuscan.
So today, this is a 2000 TVR Tucson, right? And Aaron here is a bit glutton for punishment because it's actually the second TVR that you've owned.
Right.
And you also own a variety of import businesses and other stuff, right? So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's talk about this crazy car that we're looking at here.
Yep. So as Jeff said, my name is Aaron Forster. I operate TVR Imports, also Garage Shop Coffee as well. So this is my second TVR that I've imported in the last 2 years. Obviously, 2000 TVR Tuscan 4.0 Speed 6. This was TVR's proprietary inline six that they used. Rather than go to the market and try to find something, they were very daring and decided to make their own engines, including the inline six and the V8 for the servo, which was my other car.
Yeah, which is crazy, right? That's by far the most expensive way that somebody could use to make a business, rather than just borrowing existing stuff that's been tested and proven by other manufacturers.
Yeah, exactly. So they actually got a gentleman by the name of Al Melling to design engines for MotoGP, also designed engines for like Aston Martin's F1 team, and tasked him to make a V8 to fit in one of their other cars and design an inline six as well. So although it's called a Speed 6, the technical term is the AJP6. So that's what it's also known in the car industry.
Okay, so for those not familiar, because TVR is a small company that was essentially building cars in sheds over in England, do you mind telling us a little bit about what TVR is and then what this car is?
So I'm going to kind of walk you over to the logo really quick, because TVR, where did they get it from? Well, originally it was by Trevor Wilkinson. So Trevor, it was originally Trev Car. Wasn't the best sounding name for a car company. No. So they took out some letters and vowels and just made it TVR. And they were building cars since 1946 all the way until 2006. They started selling in the United States in around the 60s, when Carroll Shelby was bringing over British Aces and putting Ford V8s into them. A gentleman by the name of Griffith in New York, he decided to do the same thing with what's called a Grand Tourer. So he brought those over, dropped a Ford V8 into the same little car and called it the Griffith. So those were considered Cobra killers. They're a little goofy looking, but they are extremely fast, lightweight tube chassis fiberglass cars that were heavily used in road racing events back in the 1960s. And after about the 1970s, with the wedge design, I call it the 280, it literally looks like a wedge of cheese. They stopped selling in the United States, and they were never here in the United States ever again, all the way until their finished production in 2006.
Okay. And then we also have to talk about, since we talked about some of the older TVRs, there's actually an earlier Tuscan as well, right? That came out in 67?
So the original Tuscan they made for 2 years. Okay. And it was the late 60s. It was originally designed to be more of a road car for like the masses, and it did very, very well, although they were just trying to transition to the next cars, more mass-produced, like the M cars or the S chassis. And the Tuscan kind of went by the wayside in favor of a lower production costs and also just a different styling. So when the Tuscan, the modern version, the Speed 6 Tuscan, was brought back, this was done at the concept in 1998 at the London Motor Show. And it was a huge revelation. People were going nuts and crazy. It had a very similar paint scheme that was all sorts of reds and golds and pinks. And it wasn't until 1999 the production version of the Speed 6 Tuscan was shown to the world in October. And that one actually, that exact car went to my client in Connecticut. That was the very, very first TVR Tuscan to be brought over to the United States under the 25-year rule, whereas this is the second one that was brought over.
Very cool. And then this is obviously an early car, as you said, right? So it's a 2000 model year, but technically it was built in 99.
Right. So the registration on the original 1999 Tuscans is kind of a weird thing. They were built to be dealer demonstration cars. So you see folks like yourself, Jeff, who get manufactured cars to drive around and have some fun, but they're not really registered in a conventional sense.
Right.
TVR made 13 of those to be demonstration vehicles.
Seems like a lot for a small company.
A lot for a small country and company. Yeah. But TVR has a very loyal fan base. They're very, very popular in the UK. And also, people just wanted to get their hands on it. It was this new, fast British car that was cheaper than Porsches, cheaper than Ferraris, looked insane, drives just as fast. But the registration of these cars was usually sometime in early, like usually Q1 or Q2 of 2000, unless you can get the build documents and the build papers, which I have. Same with the 1999 show car. We were able to bring that over in October of 1999 simply because it had the build sheet that said this is the TVR show car. October 3rd is when it was built. And because of those build documents, you were able to bring them in earlier than the 25-year registration date.
Okay, so you've provided a bunch of good reasons where you're the guy to talk to for importing TVRs. Moving into this car, so obviously this is a Tuscan, one of the earlier cars. How long did they build these, and why is it this one in such a cool color?
So TVR Tuscans were built from 1999 through 2006. They had a facelift in 2004, realistically 2005 to 2006, but even then it was just mostly cosmetic and then a couple of little things in the interior. They had a couple of options for engines, it's 3.7 liter or 4 liter from the factory in various tunes, whether it be a little bit spicier, but all of them were inline six, dual overhead cam, dry sump, aluminum engine, super lightweight. The whole car weighs 2,400 pounds.
Yeah, massive displacement for the motor, but obviously straight sixes sound gorgeous. There's been multiple times in, let's just say, general car history, right, where somebody's confused a straight six for a V12 in terms of the sound. So, but massive displacement here as opposed to some of the smaller
inline six. According to legend, the CEO of the time, Peter Wheeler, wanted to build a car similar to his inspiration, which was the Jaguar D-Type, which also was a high-performance inline six as well. But also, he wanted to have it be, you take the roof off, or you take the back window, or it could be a coupe. So the car is actually very practical. The trunk is massive. You can put the entire roof and the rear window into the trunk, including your luggage for the trip as well. So unlike modern cars, where if your roof is off, you lose luggage space. This, you get all of it and more.
Yeah, which is incredible because the car is actually, I guess, quite small, right? Like this is, I would say this just looks a little bit bigger than like an ND Miata.
So my RX-7, my FD-RX-7 is 2,800 pounds. And this is only a little bit bigger than my FD-RX-7.
Okay. Lengthwise or widthwise or both?
Lengthwise.
Okay.
And which makes sense for like the bigger engine but the packaging as a whole is very, very similar to like an FD RX-7 size-wise, just depending on where your cabin. And this has a shorter rear deck, but has a bigger trunk, has a longer engine. So very, very classic British, long front end, inline six, drop top, naturally aspirated engine, not turbocharged. So you would get all the fun revs out of it. And because it uses finger followers in the valve train, it revs very fast and very high. It's a 7,000 RPM redline, which isn't that big, but considering its time in 1999, that's actually pretty high. On the 4 liter, these were 370 horsepower or 310 pounds of torque and a 0 to 60 of 4 seconds for this version, an actual top speed of 185 miles per hour.
That's properly quick. So to explain, I guess, basically what these cars are, right? It's a steel tube chassis, right? Essentially with a fiberglass body.
Correct. It is a steel tube chassis with outriggers that stick out from the ladder frame that runs like a spine down the center of the car.
Okay.
The body itself is all one piece. The doors, yes, are separate, of course, and the hoods are separate, but the body, the fender, the quote-unquote bumpers, it's all connected as one piece. All the fiberglass is laid by hand by a bunch of guys in a barn in Europe. There's videos online that show everything was built by hand. And then they would bolt it to the chassis. There's about a dozen or so different main bolts that bolt it to the ladder frame. And you also get structure inside of the body as well.
Okay. And now we have to talk about the paint because this is called reflex purple, right?
Correct. So this is what TVRs are really known for in the 1990s. This color type, I just said the chameleon paint, people think of like Fast and Furious days in the early 2000s. Or
even the Mistachrome Cobras.
The Mistachrome paint. No. TVR really kind of set it off in the late 90s and the early 2000s. The debut of the Tuscan for the American side was from Swordfish and from Warner Brothers, where you have Halle Berry, also John Travolta and Hugh Jackman. And that one had a chameleon blue or reflex blue, very, very similar. So TVRs are known for doing crazy weird colors, kind of like the cyanide-based paint on my Cerbera. But it's very eye-catching to begin with. No matter where you look at it, photos don't do it justice. If you try to take a shot from one angle, you're going to think it's purple. You're going to think it's green. You're going to think it's mauve. turquoise, teal, blue. It shifts so fast at a drop of a hat. And this is actually the factory color. This was an option, and this is considered to be iconic TVR of the Peter Wheeler eras. Strong, powerful inline six, loud exhaust, great driving dynamics, and crazy ass color.
Yeah, so we have the crazy powertrain, weighs around 2,400-ish pounds, but the same weight as a Shelby Cobra.
Yeah.
So insanely light. No driver assists.
No driver assist.
No nannies.
No ABS. No traction control. No airbags. You die like a real man.
I mean, that all that adds weight. Yeah. Is it fully independent suspension, front and rear? Or?
Right. Fully independent front and rear.
Okay.
Disc brakes. The disc brakes are made by AP Racing, although the
TVR branded is kind of a flex.
Yeah, they are TVR branded AP Racing brake calipers. So the nice part is these parts are still readily available. I can go to AP Racing and say, hey, here's the size of my caliper. Here's the size of my rotor. And because they're sold here in the United States, I can get all those maintenance things. The clutch, I have to get from the UK, but it's a twin plate clutch.
Okay.
That you can still get. Same with all the mechanicals. There's a few little computer boxes because there's a lot of little modules buried throughout the car. There's a joke that they are more rare than chicken teeth. If you get the joke, good. But aside from the electricals, mechanically speaking, it is a exotic engine. It was a detuned race engine for the mass consumers. So you need to stay on top of it like you would any like Ferrari, any type of like Aston. Stay up on your maintenance and you're fine. The electricals, well, it's British Electronics. Take your dice and roll and see what you get.
Right. So from the powertrain perspective, does it have like a dry sump and all that type of stuff?
Yep. So to keep the weight down and also the lower center of gravity, they did a dry sump as well. And you could access all that through the miniature hood, right, or they call it a bonnet in the UK. So you have your service bonnet and then you have your main bonnet. So to get to the service bonnet, you have to do a few things. You have to pop the corners. And then reach down and release a latch, and you can get access to your oil, your power steering, and your coolant, your fans.
Interesting.
So this was actually something that Porsche does now on their new 911. So
right.
And also everything is touch button. Or if you think about today, you go to your car, it's electronic little actuators and buttons and stuff, whereas in 1999, this was a thing of the future. You reach under the door or the window, press the button to get in the car. But Jeff, here's a real question: is how do you get out of the car?
Yeah, that is a great question. How do you get out of the car?
So there's a nondescript button right here next to the radio. That's how you get out of your car.
Really? And so same thing, you got to catch the door with the release. And
so you press the button and it will pop. It will actually roll down the window a little bit if the windows are up, so it clears the target top.
Yep.
So you press the button, it pops open. And there is an OS handle. So if your battery's dead, there's a little itty bitty red handle down here that you can pull to get out in case of emergency.
Yes.
And also, you'll probably notice by looking down there, the floor mounted aluminum,
which is quite unique.
Box.
We kind of talked a little bit about off camera about how bottom mounted pedals is not very traditional for a lot of street cars at this point.
My brake reservoir, the clutch reservoir is all behind that as well. So servicing those is a pain in the butt. So you have to take off the aluminum fascia to get access to all my little reservoirs, and make sure you have a very good service light, bendy light to get in there to check your levels, and heaven forbid you ever have a leak back there, because it'll be a pain in the butt to clean up the mess.
Yeah, glutton for punishment seems to be the least, like a very common phrase for these cars, because, the engineering and I guess performance kind of seems like that was kind of the forefront of the thinking, and not so much how easy is this to work on later.
And I've said this before in my own videos, TVR is a car company by car guys for car guys, or car people for car people. They were not thinking of, oh, hey, let's keep the sound decibels to a certain minimum, or, oh, let's make like the world's fastest car. Like, let's just make something that's fun to drive and looks cool. And in the very traditional sense of the way the cars were built, it was like, oh, that'll do. That'll do.
Okay, so taking a look at the rest of the interior, a lot of this is aluminum, and then you have brass in here as well?
Yeah, so TVR spent a lot of time and investment machining actual brass and aluminum panels, switchgear, the whole face of the speedometer, which you'll notice if you zoom in on that, you'll see there's no tachometer.
Yeah, a little unusual.
Right, so you have a digital
For a
tachometer.
manual transmission car too.
And so what TVR did to kind of get around this, to make it a little safer and easier to drive, you do have a mode button you can press. It cycles through different modes. You can get to an actual tachometer. It's a digital one still. But you also have your shift lights. So on top of the engine, you have this little binnacle with 3 little dots, and it goes green, yellow, red. And this is your shift lights. You can program them to what RPM range you want, so you don't over rev the engine, or if you want to take it to the max, you know exactly how far you're going. But also, if you think about it, it's actually a good safety mechanism. Your eyes are on the road, your hands are on the steering wheel, and all you have to do is just wait for that little red light to pop up and keep going.
Yeah, so the other crazy thing, this car was optioned with air conditioning, right? So
Correct.
that's kind of a unique thing for this car. But then the windows in particular, right, are quite interesting in terms of how they work.
Once again,
a knob or a dial.
It's a dial, yeah. And rather than say push it up or down, they're at least they're somewhat descript. They have a picture of a window on it, but they don't tell you left or right goes up or down. So you have to kind of figure out which one's the direction, and then the other side's the exact opposite.
Because that makes sense.
Because that would make sense. So, and when you roll up the windows or roll them down, it's not a command. It is a request. You politely request to roll it up, and it'll go up a little bit. You request some more, it goes up a little bit more beyond that. Likewise, it's going down. So it's, once again, why? Because TVR.
You think from a country where it rains a lot, they would want to be able to quickly...
roll them up faster.
Yeah.
So like in my Cerbera, it was a standard up and down button, no problems. And like any other car other than the Tuscan, like even in the Sagres later on, they have 3 nondescript buttons on either side, windows and doors, but this just, no.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, for a lot of cars, people may not be familiar, but it took a while to actually start labeling buttons and stuff for a lot of different cars and manufacturers. And so this is kind of better for labeling, but the fact that they were non-traditional controls,
right?
Maybe they should have... Was there an owner's manual for these cars? Or
yes, actually the owner's manual is quite thick and very extensive.
I believe it, yeah.
They also tell you what temperatures to keep it under. All right, if you're going to want to drive sportingly, wait until like oil temperature reaches this, or your temperatures reach that. So it wasn't just get in and go. It was very, very detailed, because this was still of the mindset of most of our owners are going to spend money to maintain them or work on them themselves. So there's a lot of little tips and tricks. Another common thing is about these cars is, well, how do you get into the car if the battery's dead? Well, there's like almost like a secret handshake that you get from passing from owner to owner of how to break into your own car without damaging your car. Which it was kind of interesting, because my battery was dead on bringing this over from the UK. So the guys at the port were freaking out, saying, how do we get into your car? How do you get into your car? And so I'm like, oh gosh, oh no. The last thing I want is for somebody to know, like, to see my car, like, I know how to break into this. Let me get this tool and we can get this car going. But even then, if somebody even got in the car, unless you knew or watched this video, you have no idea how to get out of the car. So you're trapped inside of it.
Well, you know, maybe you just leave the top off. You live,
right.
Maybe you buy one and you live in California where it's perfect all year round,
or in Arizona and just park it in the summer. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the interior. The styling of a lot of things is almost like, let's say, has like an interesting ergonomic look. The purple carpet is by far my favorite feature of the interior. But then you could also remove the rear window, as you mentioned earlier,
Correct.
which will make it almost like a first-gen Viper.
Very similar. I call it a 90% convertible.
90% convertible.
So I love the idea of the Targa, because it's a coupe when I want it to be, it's a Targa when I want it to be, or it's practically a convertible as well. And it's just a couple of latches in the back, slide it out, put it under in the trunk, and head off. It's kind of funny, because in the UK, you say, hey, I want to have like a nice stereo, and they're like, why? Your car sounds good enough. Just take the top down and drive, enjoy the soundtrack of the Speed 6, which it does sound beautiful. But I will say I do miss having cruise control. That's the only thing I wish they would have added. But then again, I get teased online for saying, "Oh, you're too American. You don't need cruise control in this car. You should be driving."
They don't get it until they visit here. The fact that you can, drive 8 hours and you've driven all through England,
Right.
you can be driving 8 hours here in the United States and still be in the same state.
Exactly. I'm like, this takes 2 days to get across Texas alone, and that's like driving like 10 hours a day.
Yeah. They don't get it unless they've actually been to the U.S.
Exactly.
So we've gone through kind of the exterior, underneath. We have motorcycle exhaust pipes on the back.
Yeah, so TVR spends all this time and money to having these beautiful machined aluminum and brass, and then they decide, all right, we need mufflers. What's available? Slip-on motorcycle exhaust from 1990s. It looks cool. It's carbon fiber.
I think it fits the theme for the car. The car has kind of like a spaceship look to it,
Right.
and they have the same sort of futuristic early 2000s era tone to them.
Exactly.
So I think it kind of fits in.
And then getting into the trunk, just like anything, you press a button and you can see the top.
And there's the roof.
And it looks like this is very, very full, but it sits on top and all the space underneath this is completely empty. So I can put all my luggage, put everything. There's a couple of carry-ons, no problem. It's a good 2-body trunk.
Okay. So one of the things I also wanted to bring up, we have the very interesting turn signals and hazards mounted at the top there, which I guess helps for people to see you. I wanted to talk about some of the other options for these cars, right? There were a couple different, we talked a little bit about the performance models. One in particular that you spoke of that really piqued my interest was was it Rose?
Yeah, Red Rose.
Red Rose.
Right. So TVR had 2 different versions of the Speed Six. They had a 3.7 liter, then the 4 liter. And then in later 2000, they came out with a Red Rose edition, which was like their performance edition. And also it was a lightweight version. And how TVR did lightweight on a lightweight car,
yes,
they had thinner fiberglass. So you were able to shave off with the combination of resin and fiberglass mat a couple 100 pounds just by having thinner fiberglass, which
that doesn't sound like a great idea. It sounds like if you left it out here in Arizona during the summer, that you'd come back to a softer, misshapen.
Yeah, I don't think they had Arizona
TVR
weather in mind. So that was
right.
That was one thing. Is okay, we're gonna do a little bit sportier suspension, and then lighter weight fiberglass body, and then they also had a spicier tune. So it was a 4 liter, but it was 390 horsepower, but the torque was only 315, so it was only 5 more torque over the regular 4-cylinder. So it's all like top end power. So it was more of a sporting version. The Red Rose edition became Rose Red. You got it backward and forward. Sorry. That eventually became the S. So you had Tuscan and you had Tuscan S or Sport. So the second version, the Mark II, eventually got the 400 horsepower version of the Speed Six, which was also later put into the Sagres. It was shared across the T350, the Tamora, and yes, the Sagres. Then they took that engine and ultimately put a supercharged version of that inside what was going to be the Tuscan R, later renamed like the Typhon. And that was going to be a carbon fiber tubbed, Speed Six powered, 200 plus mile per hour, and actually just recently sold at auction for a few $100,000 in the UK, the one of 3.
Okay, so that's kind of I guess a quick look, and we've talked a bit about the breakdown of the specs and this crazy car that is a fiberglass tube chassis British race car with a proprietary motor, lots of interesting engineering approaches, and big aspirations for this company, right? But now I think we need to take a listen. Here's some of the sounds of the car and take it for a drive, right? So button.
Give it a second.
It has a pull.
That was about 6,000 RPM.
Okay. That was in second?
That was the second gear pull up to about 6,000 RPM.
Very sensitive.
Very, very. The brakes are very, very firm. And that was my water bottle that just hit my feet. Third is way over here. First was like over here, third's like right here, so it's really far over.
All right, so there you have it. That is a quick look at this 2000 TVR Tuscan. Now, Aaron, obviously you also import these, right?
Correct.
What is the best way to get in touch with you as far as getting a hold of that? If somebody wants to import one of these to the States.
So if you're looking to import, whether it be a Tuscan or any TVR that's under the 25-year rule, visit tvrimports.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or my website
you've got your
directly.
social media on the side, right? You actually post, you just got done posting a YouTube video where you talked about replacing the battery stuff that you mentioned in the video,
there's a lot of more quirks and features, as the internet knows, of these cars, including the battery terminal location. So if you do get one, I recommend getting all that stuff done in the UK before shipping it over, so you don't end up with a dead battery like mine did when it arrived.
Okay, and you also actually have some info on there from your Cerberus as well, including a full kind of review.
Right. So I did a full review of my Cerberus. So outside Jay Leno and Doug DeMuro, I'm the #1 TVR guy in the United States.
Very, very cool. You also have some other side hustles, right? And some stuff that you have going on that's kind of automotive based.
So if you like coffee, go to Cars and Coffee. I actually have what's called Garage Shop Coffee. Please visit garageshopcoffee.com. You can also visit regular social media for Instagram as well as Facebook. But it's all automotive based. It's all gourmet, custom grind for whatever you want to do, whether it be light, medium, dark, and even some flavors. They're all interesting artwork and design. So yeah, tvrimports.com, Aaron's Eccentric Garage, and Garage Shop Coffee. And then if I start another business, my wife's gonna wonder where I went.
Yeah, no kidding. So you're incredibly busy guy, but very quirky cars, right? Between this, the RX-7 even having owned the Cerberus and some other stuff like that. And you do go to a lot of the regular local Cars and Coffees, right? So I'm sure you'd be more than happy to talk to people as they have questions. This car gets a ton of attention, and this morning was called a mermaid car.
Yes. I got called by a very, very cute little girl saying, "Mommy, look, it's a mermaid car." I'm like, "Oh, sweet child."
So there you have it. That's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you could leave me a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. Consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. Don't forget to check out Aaron's stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.